Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 2023 Womentum Leadership Summit, Getting Real, Choosing Authenticity. My name is Kristen Fox, and I am so thrilled to be greeting you all tonight for the first time as the new Executive Director for Womentum. We are a Jackson Hole-based nonprofit committed to inspiring and connecting women to thrive as leaders. We do that through this annual Leadership Summit, our speaker series, workshops, and our signature 9-month-long mentoring program. I am grateful to have participated in many of these programs, including being a mentor, serving on the board, and it is now my honor to lead Womentum into our next chapter, and I am so grateful for your participation and support. To begin, I want to thank the Center for the Arts and their team for this beautiful venue and for making this live stream possible. The event is being recorded, so for if any reason you're having technical issues at home, there will be a recording after. I also want to bring attention to our event sponsors, especially our title sponsor, the Jackson Hole Travel and Tourism Board. Please take note of our local businesses who have given their support for our events and thank them. I'd also like to recognize our board members. Our chair, Pontier Zachary, our vice chair, Lena Collado, our secretary, Sam Sima, treasurer, Lexi Waters, past chair, Elizabeth Rohrbach, Karen Flanagan, Leslie Hardy, Augusta Friendsmith, Melinda Lee, Lisa Kitchen, and Chris Sheen. Melissa Cassett, our director of communications, a Womentum alumna, has been integral in making this event possible and helping with our amazing crew of volunteers. Emmy DeGrappa, Tanya Mark, Charlotte Alexander, Krista Valentino, Andrea Gomez-Oxman, Ben Turner, Amanda Martin, Olivia Schulteis, Martha Lewis, Lynn Hefner, and Justina Lindeman. Thank you to our volunteers for all of your help. Finally, I'd like to recognize and introduce one final key person to all of our programming that's had such an impact on Womentum over the last 5 years. My predecessor and personal mentor, Samantha Eddy, has been instrumental in the growth of Womentum, supporting over 200 women going through our annual cohort, and over 1,000 women annually through our workshops and this annual event. Please join me in welcoming Sam Eddy to the stage to introduce our speaker tonight and give her a round of applause for her very successful tenure at Womentum.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. And I have to say, I couldn't be more proud to be on the stage tonight. This event feels like the ultimate passing of the torch between me and Kristen Fox, as I began planning this event with the planning committee, and Kristen is doing an amazing job bringing it to fruition. Little did I know back in early spring what the theme of this year's summit, Getting Real, Finding Authenticity, would mean for me now as I embark on my next chapter. But that's enough about me. I have the honor of introducing tonight's keynote speaker, Ruth Rathblott. Ruth and I were classmates in high school. In alignment with Womentum's mission, we attended an all-girls school dedicated to creating a space for girls and ultimately women to thrive. While Ruth and I were not close friends in school, we shared some classes and activities. It wasn't until we were at our 20th reunion, however, that I discovered what a magician Ruth was, as it was our first time I saw her secret. But even then, I wasn't sure. As is often the case with reconnecting with old acquaintances, I began to follow Ruth on social media and became impressed with her accomplishments in the nonprofit sector. Over the years, Ruth has won awards and made huge accomplishments as Executive Director for Big Brothers and Big Sisters of New York City, or Associate Executive Director for Big Brothers and Big Sisters of New York City, as Executive Director for Everybody Wins in New York, and ultimately as 9 years as CEO and President of the Harlem Educational Activities Fund. In 2021, Ruth stepped beyond her role of helping youth and took a leap of faith to fulfill her personal mission to empower and foster a community and movement around unhiding. She aspires to a world where individuals unapologetically share their uniqueness, where diversity isn't just acknowledged, but celebrated. So before I ask Ruth onto the stage, I'd like to prime her talk by asking each of you a few questions. Have you ever felt you had to hide a part of yourself to fit in? Do you think anyone on your team, at work, or in your family has? Do you wish you could be part of an inclusive community where people feel seen and heard and different experiences and perspectives are valued? Yes? Then you're in the right place. This is a conversation for everyone, and it will require you to think about yourself, those on your team, and in your life in introspective ways. Ruth is an expert who delves into the profound concept of expanding the definition of diversity to be truly inclusive. What makes her uniquely relevant is a defining experience when she was questioned about the diversity of leadership at an organization she was part of, and courageously shared how she didn't feel included in that discussion. Her differences were dismissed. She realized that she was still hiding parts of herself. This pivotal interaction sparked her profound realization that the way we frame diversity conversations can inadvertently force people to hide essential aspects of their identity. This insight propelled her on to her transformative journey. She's not just a TEDx speaker, she's the best-selling author of the profoundly impactful book, Single-Handedly, Learning to Unhide and Embrace Connection. And I do want to mention that books will be for sale after her talk tonight in the lobby. With immense wisdom and compassion, she's here to engage us in a discourse on how to unhide our best selves and foster an environment of belonging. Let's extend our warmest welcomes to the remarkable Ruth Rathblott.
As I look around, all of us have something in common. What if I told you that everyone is hiding something? It could be our age, it could be our weight, it could be the natural hair color we have, it could be how we left our last job, or the grades we got in school. But all of us are hiding something. And some of you may be thinking, I really hope she doesn't ask me what I'm hiding. Some of you may be thinking, do I hide? And some of you treat life like an open book. You don't hide anything. And just to be clear, what I mean by hiding is deliberately not sharing a part of yourself for fear of judgment and fear of rejection. And I know firsthand about hiding because I kept a secret for half my life. And it wasn't always easy. And if you had told me at any point that I would be in Jackson Hole talking and sharing my secret with you, there was no way I would have said, I believed you. I would have dismissed you, and I would have probably laughed it off. But yet here I am, and I'm going to share my secret with you. And my secret started when I was in high school, right before Sam and I met. And I'm wondering how many of you remember your first day of high school? Can I see a show of hands? Okay. I do. She looked a little something like this. She's really sweet. But it's almost like my mom forgot to tell me, Ruthie, maybe you should brush your hair before you go to school. Thanks, I wish she had. And I bet I'm not the only one in here who has a photo from high school that makes you cringe just a little. Bad haircuts, braces, big, thick glasses, the kind that are actually coming back into style now. The outfits that we can't even imagine we'd get away with today, that was high school. So there I was. It was September 7th, 1983. And I was at the bottom of my driveway waiting for the yellow school bus. I was excited and nervous. I was leaving the safe confines of my middle school to head to the big high school in our town. I imagine some of you can relate to that excitement and nervousness of starting a new school. And as the bus approached, I took a deep breath in, and I climbed those 3 steep stairs, and I made my first high school decision. Where should I sit? I wasn't going to sit in the front row, like nobody here would do, it seems like. And I wasn't daring enough or cool enough to head to the back of the bus, like the people up there. I didn't want to sit with the cool people or the troublemakers. So I chose a seat right in the middle, just to fit in, just to see what was going on. And as the bus kept picking up more and more kids, I could feel my anxiety grow. We all started checking each other out. Would I like them? Would they like me? Did I like what they were wearing? Was I wearing the right thing to start high school? It's almost like when you're a teenager, fitting in is magnified. And then it happened. Somebody got on the bus, and they stared just a little bit too long. They noticed my hand. And I immediately became self-conscious and tucked my little hand into the front left pocket of my jeans. I had never done that before. And I just felt like it was safe there because nobody else could stare. I didn't like the feeling of people staring at me. And so I kept it just for the bus ride, I thought. And as we got to school, my hand stayed glued in my pocket. And I told myself, well, let's just have it stay there for today so that you can make friends, so people won't think it's weird. And that first day turned into that first week. And that first week turned into that first year. And I couldn't stop hiding it. And when I went back for the second year, I thought, I'm going to stop hiding. I'm so exhausted of having to figure out every outfit that would have pockets in it, of getting out of class early so I could use my locker with both hands and hold books, so that I could skip out on gym class because I was afraid of people seeing it. I was also so tired of skipping lunch because I was afraid when I held the tray with one hand that someone would bump into it and knock my tray over. So I just didn't go to lunch. But I went back for that second year, and I kept hiding it. And then I went off to college, and like a lot of us, I thought, well, this is my chance to be somebody new. They don't need to know about my history in high school of hiding. And when I got to campus, I didn't stop hiding. I didn't know how. Because, see, hiding is a lot like lying. You know that little white lie that you can tell and it snowballs into a bigger lie? That's what hiding is like. The more that we hide, the harder it is to stop hiding. And so when I was thinking about today and thinking about what it means to be real and to be authentic, and what could I share with all of you, I thought about my journey and the journey from hiding to learning to unhide. Because I found that, like I started today, most of us, and I might even argue all of us, are hiding something about ourselves, and it holds us back from thriving. It holds us back from connecting. And when I think about women and I think about mentoring, I think about the possibilities that we have to be our true selves and to show those true selves so that we can be great mentors and so we can be great mentees and that we can build businesses and we can build lives that are fulfilling. And when I flew into Jackson yesterday, I thought, what a perfect setting to not only be with Womentum and to be with a high school colleague, but to be in a place that's so beautiful and so natural in its beauty that it doesn't need to hide. Because when it's snowing and raining like it was today, the Teton Mountains were hiding, but then they came out at one point. Like, it's a cool place to deliver this. And so what I want to do over our time together is be able to tap in a little bit to what you might be hiding. But it's not going to be the kind of thing where I'm going to ask you to turn to a neighbor and share. That's not what this is about. So you can relax, you can exhale. We'll save that for tomorrow, and Bonnie. What this is going to be about is what I call being self-centered. And not in the bad way, but being self-centered, like being introspective, thinking about yourself. And I'm going to give you a framework of 4 steps on how to unhide, and also start the journey today as a personal journey with a tool on how to unhide. Sound good? Even up in the troublemaker section? Sound good? Yeah? Okay. I'm curious, and I ask questions for thought process, but also for reaction. And I'm curious, when I talk about hiding, I'm wondering what percentage of people do you think own that they hide at least one part of themselves? What percentage of people admit hiding at least one part of themselves in a workplace? Throw out some numbers. 75%, that's a great number. What else? 50, 100? 62? I like that. Nearly 100, I love it. 35, okay, we're going a little low. Like maybe people are really hiding a lot. Okay. It turns out that Deloitte did a study in 2013. So whoever said 62, I feel like, oh, thank you. You must have read ahead. 61% of people hide at least one part of themselves in the workplace. Now that was 2013. 10 years later, I think it's closer to some of the numbers you mentioned. I think the number is higher, much higher. The last 3 years alone, now almost 4 years alone, have allowed us to hide behind cameras off and muted microphones. Even someone reminded me when I was speaking recently, what about the fake backgrounds that people have so you can't see their dirty laundry or their dishes that haven't been done? That's hiding. So I think that that number is a lot higher. And people hide things all the time. Like the woman who I met who told me that she was hired during COVID, and her coworkers don't know that, in her words, from the legs down, she's immobile. She's terrified to go back to the office. She hasn't told her manager or her coworkers. And she's terrified that if she does tell them when she shows up, they'll judge her and think she can't do the job. They won't invite her to the after-work happy hours, or they'll have to make special accommodations for her. Or the man that told me that when he works from home, he turns his camera off and mutes his microphone so that his child, who has mental health challenges and sometimes has outbursts, won't be seen on camera. Because he doesn't want that child to have that scrutiny. But he also doesn't want to be seen as a bad father or a bad leader. No, people hide things all the time. They hide things like their disabilities, like mine, visible, and you may be saying, well, some people maybe can't hide their visible disabilities. And I'm here to share they can, because sometimes they don't share their journey with you of how great it can be and also how challenging it can be. They may just answer you saying, everything's fine. So people sometimes hide that part of visible disabilities. They also hide invisible disabilities, like mental health, depression, being bipolar, anxiety, addiction. Also neurodiversity, ADHD, autism, dyslexia. And beyond that, beyond disability, people have shared other things that they're hiding with me. I talk globally about this with companies, and I ask people what they're hiding. People have shared that they hide their age in the workplace. I had a friend, when I was getting on stage, she said, whatever you do, don't tell them our age. And I said, well, how do we know each other? And she said, we met in New York. Because she said she works in the tech industry, and then in the tech industry, age is a serious thing. Like, she doesn't want to be seen as outaged. People hide their education. They hide their family backgrounds, their financial status. What else, as I'm talking about those things, what else can you imagine people hiding? Religion, absolutely. What else? More and more political affiliations, politics, it comes up a lot. People are afraid to say their politics. Sexual preference, absolutely. And that list goes on. As you're hearing this, you can be thinking about what else are people hiding. And sometimes people don't realize they're hiding until we have a conversation about it. I'm curious, and this is a personal curiosity question, how many of you, and I've had people answer before I finish the question, so I'm just resonant with that too, I'm owning that. How many of you, when you get on a plane, can't wait to see who's sitting next to you because you want to talk to them? Can you raise your hands if you can? Okay, there's like one of us, maybe two, okay, maybe three of us in the room. I'm with you. I find people fascinating. My father never wants to sit next to me, he told me on a plane, because I like to talk to people. I love hearing their stories. So a few months ago, when I was on a plane headed out west to speak, I sat next to a man, and we started to get to that part of the conversation where we asked each other what we do. He told me he was a graphic designer, and I said, that's great. And I told him how I work with leaders to help build culture around unhiding. And I told him a little bit of my journey. And immediately his head dropped. And he said, I never talk about this. And of course, my ears perked up. And he said, I dropped out of high school and never went to college. And I never tell anyone that. Because I'm afraid that they'll think that I'm not smart enough, that I can't own a business, that I won't be successful, and yet I have this successful graphic design business. He said, when those conversations about college come up, I just want to leave the room. I just want to get out of there. And so as we think about the hiding part of this, I have found that there are 3 parts to hiding. It's universal, 1. It's exhausting, 2. And 3rd, it's lonely. Hiding takes a toll on our mental and physical health. It keeps us disconnected from ourselves and from others. Hiding prevents us from thriving in life, in our personal lives and our professional lives, and it often leads to burnout. And most of us who are hiding don't know how to stop hiding, just like my story. And what's interesting about that is that it's like we create cultures in workplaces, and maybe you've been part of them, where we don't want to see difference. We talk about difference as you don't belong if you have a difference. We don't want to see it, you don't fit in. And so what happens instead is people act like they don't see it. They don't talk about it. They don't bring it up because they're afraid of asking the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing and getting in trouble with HR or their manager. So they don't bring it up, and that keeps people hiding even more. And when people hide more, it's why they leave us in our companies and our communities. It's why they don't want to return to work, because they don't feel that their differences, or the other D word, disabilities, are valued. Their different perspectives and their different experiences are valued or seen or heard. And just a little asterisk about disability. Disability is the largest minority group. Last month was National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and in July was Disability Pride Month. Disability cuts across all lenses of diversity. You can be any race, right, and have a disability. You can be any gender and have a disability. You can be any sexual orientation and have a disability. Disability also affects us at any age. We can be born with a disability, we can acquire one at some point of our lives, or we can be taking care of somebody with a disability. And it's important, and I was talking with Sam earlier today, even saying the word disability is important because it allows for identity. This is a conversation that will impact all of us, as is hiding. And I invite you into this conversation not because it's easy, because it's not easy. Hiding, it takes over. Unhiding is the freedom that you get on the other side. And it's powerful because it connects us and allows us to connect with people. So I invite you in to this part and sharing with you now, let's go there. Let's dive in a little bit in terms of how it affects us on a personal level and how it affects us as a professional level. And just to give you some of the statistics, just so you see a little bit more, this is what I mean by hiding. This was a 2019 study. The one that shocked me the most on this was the last one. 45% of straight men are hiding. What do you think they're hiding? Besides affairs and things like that. That is not what I'm talking about. What do you think they're hiding? Yeah, I'm watching way too much Suits. I give myself up. What do you think they're hiding? Fear, yes. And where does fear come from? Not being enough, yes. And society, we have pressures. And what the statistic is also adding into with that fear and not being enough is mental health. 45% of white men, and I think this is actually a low number too, because of what we're taught about admitting fear and admitting mental health. And hopefully, this was done before COVID. Hopefully, COVID has opened up some of those lenses to start talking about mental health. So let's go there. Let's talk about the personal and professional, because hiding affected me in both, and hiding affects us all in both areas. Hiding is a little bit like, for those gardeners out there, hiding is a little bit like that weed that at first looks kind of innocent, and you pick it and it grows back, but it kind of is pretty. Some weeds are pretty. And you pick it, but weeds, what they do is they sap the nutrients, right? And they sap you can tell I'm from New York City because I don't know a lot about gardening. But I do know that weeds take over plants, and some you can't get rid of. And that's what hiding feels like. And even after college, I kept hiding. I kept hiding and not knowing how to stop hiding. And it started affecting me like a weed in terms of taking away some of the activities and the thriving and those enjoyable things I did. I backed out of trips with friends to the beach, not just because I didn't want to wear a bathing suit, which some people can relate to, but I didn't want to wear short sleeves. I didn't want anyone to see my hand. And this is ski country, so this will resonate, hopefully. I didn't go on ski trips, even though I had spent my youth skiing, because I couldn't stand having chairlift operators and passersby asking me why I needed only one pole. I was constantly forecasting and worried about my next steps so as not to get discovered. On dates, and it's funny, when we went to dinner last night, I actually thought about this. On dates, there were times I really, really wanted steak, and I know you have great steak out here. But when the waiter came, I would say, I'll have pasta, because it was just so much easier to cut with one hand. Hiding ruled my life. I stopped doing the activities I loved doing, like kayaking and water skiing, running for student government, theater. All of my outfits always had pockets. I wore longer sleeves, sweatshirts, even in the summer. I hid my hand behind bags and book bags so no one would see it. I got really, really good at this. I was the magician that Sam referred to. I was a con artist in some ways, making people believe that I had two hands when I only had one. This is tough to admit. But even during intimate encounters, my partners never knew. So you can imagine how pleasant and present I was. And I lived this way for 25 years. And I made myself believe that this was something to be embarrassed about, that if someone found out, they wouldn't like me. They wouldn't hire me. They wouldn't date me. And if I'm really being honest with this group, they'd find me ugly as I found myself. And I believe that most of us do that at some level with the thing that makes us different. And I invite you to think about that thing that makes you different. What is your pocket story? What are you hiding? Because that doesn't allow us to thrive and grow like that beautiful flower. It is that weed that sucks the nutrients. And most of us don't even realize we're hiding. Like the woman who told me she wears a full face of makeup to cover her scars because she doesn't want anyone to see. Or the man who told me that he doesn't talk in meetings because of a stutter. Or the woman who told me she doesn't talk in meetings because of an accent, because they both are afraid of judgment. Or the people who look like they have it all together in terms of their personal selves. They buy the best things, they keep up with the Joneses, and yet they're drowning in financial debt. That's hiding. And hiding not only affects us in our personal lives, most of us can't separate our personal lives and our professional lives. I couldn't either. Hiding often manifests itself, and this may sound familiar. Hiding manifests itself as overachieving, overcompensating, doing it better, doing it faster, coming in earlier, staying later. That's what hiding can look like. And I know because when I was 20, I landed a coveted summer internship at a New York City law firm. And my job that summer was to showcase the evolution, get ready, drum roll, of a laundry detergent box top. It probably sounds super boring to all of you, but to me, it was the most exciting project because it was mine. I got to get the accolades that I wanted with it. I got to work on it and get the special credit. And my job was to cut out various box top competitors and prove why this one deserved a patent. And so you can imagine 3 weeks in, this overachieving self was called into the senior partner's office. I practically skipped there. He didn't ask me to sit down. "Ruth, did you ever go to kindergarten?" He barked at me, and I said, "Because if you had, you would have learned how to use scissors." I left his office embarrassed and ashamed because of my secret. I was hiding, and I was trying to do the work with one hand. He didn't know about my hand, the HR didn't know, my coworkers didn't know, and I was sure not going to tell him on that spot about it because it wasn't safe. So I had a decision to make. Should I stay and do the internship and try to get it done and figure it out, or do I leave and just drop the mic and that's it, I'm out? I decided to stay. And I got resourceful in terms of I figured out how to use huge law books to hold down the pieces of paper so they wouldn't move. I found the basement downstairs, this musty room, and nobody ever went down there. I got to do the work down there with 2 hands. I even stayed after hours and missed out on the happy hours and the flirtation of New York City. And I got the job done, and I got the accolades I craved, but I was exhausted and lonely. And you might be sitting there saying, well, yeah, but it made you super resourceful. Look at that overachiever that got it done. It did, but I was also exhausted and lonely. And we know what happens with people who overachieve. They get promoted, right? They often are the ones that will take on the extra assignments. They'll get promoted. And I did. I kept overachieving, I kept hiding, and I kept getting promoted. And as Sam mentioned, I got to be a CEO of organizations, and I got to do great things. And just like Mr. Kindergarten, I was focused on productivity and performance. And our numbers looked great. We were meeting our goals. We were even exceeding our goals with young people served, with dollars raised, and everything seemed okay. Except just like Mr. Kindergarten, I forgot about people. See, I had adopted an old school leadership mentality that said, keep people at arm's length, don't be vulnerable, have all the answers. And yet I didn't realize the culture I was creating by adopting that and not letting people in, because people didn't know about my hand. They didn't know about my journey with disability. And so even though they loved coming in to work with this big vision, big visionary, they started to leave pretty soon after because they felt disconnected from me. I came across as cold. I came across as just being focused on achieving, and that's what I wanted my staff to focus on. And so they left me, and they felt disconnected, they felt exhausted, they felt lonely, and so did I as a leader. And maybe you've been there too, that place that you know you can't keep moving forward. You get to that place that you're so tired and exhausted of overachieving and overcompensating and keeping people disconnected from you at arm's length, that I knew something had to give, but I had to acknowledge what it was. And that's step 1 in unhiding, is acknowledging what's holding you back, acknowledging what keeps you from thriving, acknowledging what you're hiding. And they say that, some say, when you're ready for change, the universe shows up and gives you those pieces. Others say, no, that's not what happens at all. Your brain takes over and starts showing you the solutions. In either case, I was so ready for change that when someone offered an outstretched hands of support, I took it. He was different. He was curious. He asked questions. He listened really well. I learned that he had his own journey of difference, and he had empathy. And so I made my best decision yet. I invited him in to get to know me and to get to know my hand. He was what I deemed hand-worthy. He was trustworthy. And that's step 2, is finding your person and inviting them in. Because the valuable lessons I learned by doing that were actually literally, and I know people use the word literally sometimes too much, but he literally showed me how to take my hand out of my pocket and look at it. I had never done that before. It had been buried so deep in my pocket. I allowed myself to touch my hand and other people. I hadn't done that since I was a kid with my parents. I also, every winter, got frostbite on my hand. I didn't know how to protect it. I learned how to protect my hand and part of me. And probably the most valuable lesson I got was I learned to love that part of myself that I deemed unlovable for so long. And by letting him in, I started letting other people in little by little too, because I started to feel safe with it. And I started to show up in the world in a different way. I even went online because I started to see people with disabilities, and I went online and I searched for people with limb differences. And I started to meet people with limb differences. I actually started to see them on the computer screen. There was my hand on other people. I had felt alone my entire life, thinking I was the only one. And here was this group of people that I started to meet that we had this shared experience. And that was super powerful to know I wasn't alone. I thought I had invented hiding. I hadn't. Well, other people had hidden too. And that's step 3, is build your community. Step 1, acknowledge what you're hiding. Step 2, invite someone in to share your secret with. Step 3, build your community. Because as we start to build our communities, we start to share our experiences out, and people start sharing their experiences with us. It's like the woman who I was coaching who came to me and she said, Ruth, I just went to this weekend retreat with my team at work, and I told them about my anxiety. And I thought I was doing it so that they would get to know me and know why my different reactions were coming up. And I said, okay. She said, yeah, but something amazing happened. Afterward, people did come up and thank me for sharing my story. And then one man came up and said, thank you for sharing your story, because I'm struggling with how to tell people at work about my ADHD. She said, I had no idea that by sharing my story, somebody else would see themselves in my story and get it. And that's step 4, is share your story. Because unhiding allows for people to see themselves in us. It's a powerful way to connect with people. It's a powerful way to open the door for connections. And it's a powerful way to get to know ourselves again and start living the lives that we really want to be living. And I think the beauty of this is that it starts today. And I promised you it's not going to be something where you're turning to your partner, but in your folder, you have a postcard, a purple postcard that I know I have a copy of up here that looks like this. It's also on the screen. This is step 1 for you, and I'm going to invite you to take that first step today with me and write down what it is that you're hiding. I've done this exercise globally, and people share with me so many things that they're hiding. And probably the most impactful one was when I was speaking to young people, and I had this bias that young people share everything on social media. They're not hiding anything. And when I was signing books after, I asked this young woman, and I did this activity with the students, and I thought, they're never going to do it. They're not going to fill out the postcards. I'm going to get blank ones back. But they did it. And as I was signing books, this one young woman, I asked her, what resonated in my talk? What did you get out of it? And she whispered, she said, your postcard activity. And I said, well, what about my postcard activity? She said, "It's the first time I've ever been able to share my secret with anyone." So again, I invite you to think about your pocket story and write down what you're hiding. And there are going to be baskets, if I'm not mistaken, outside to drop your postcard in, because this is the first step. So I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Yes. Okay. And you can also take a screenshot in the QR code. I have 2 more. And again, this is not something you're sharing out. This is just for you. And now you have the 4 steps. This is the first step, acknowledging it. So I want you to take a deep breath, exhale, because you took the first step. And these are the 4 steps of unhiding. The first step you've taken today. The second step is inviting someone in. I'm sure when I mentioned that step, there was a go-to person that you have in mind, somebody that came to mind immediately, whether it's a friend, a mentor, a mentee, someone in your workspace, a family member, a friend, somebody that came to mind, that you can go home tonight and say, you know what? I heard this woman talk that she hid her hand for 25 years, and she claims that 61% of us, even more, are hiding something. It got me thinking. What do you think about that? It starts the conversation. It's your go-to person that you would share something with like this. The third step is building your community. It's the beauty of Womentum. It's the beauty of having connection and networking and community and mentors. That's how you start to build your community. It doesn't have to be a lot of people. It can be a small group. And even if you're struggling with, well, I don't know if I'm going to share out my story here, Google it, your difference, because there are communities out there for everyone. That's the beauty of the internet. I know we talk a lot about the internet being tough, but that's the beauty of the internet. There are people out there, you are not alone. And if you're struggling with it, let me know. And then the fourth step is sharing your story. And it doesn't have to be getting up on stage like I am and sharing it out. It doesn't have to be going on Dr. Phil or Oprah. It can actually just be a few close people. And I want to recognize the privilege I have of being able to share my story, because I know in 2023, there are certain groups who don't have that safety in sharing their story. And my hope and my North Star is that at some point we will all be able to share and unhide our differences, because our differences will be celebrated. That's the community I'm building. And so while I've given you a lot to think about, to be self-centered about, I want to ask you for your help, because I am building out a community. And I'm building out a community of unhiding. I'm building a movement, and I need your help. And so I'm going to ask you for 2 minutes to take this QR code, take out your phones, take this QR code, and give me some feedback. Who else needs to hear this story? And this is a really easy survey. There's a lot of you'll see little happy faces, sad faces, all of that, mostly happy faces, hopefully. But give me some feedback and take 2 or 3 minutes. And then what we'll do is we'll go into some Q&A, and then I'm going to close with another story and have it, because unhiding is a valuable tool. And it's actually a loop that's really powerful, because the reason it's written like that is once you share your story, it allows for someone else to start to acknowledge what they're hiding. So I'm going to give you just a few minutes for that. put down the phones, that would be awesome. Then I know people are done.
Okay, while you all are finishing your comments, I want to take a moment first to thank Ruth for sharing such a powerful story. I also can't recommend her book enough if you want to go further into the journey of unhiding. For the next portion of our program, I would like to welcome someone from our community to have a dialogue with Ruth about unhiding. And then after their conversation, we will go into a little bit of Q&A. We've got the box that we can share so you can ask your questions. So at this time, Ruth will join Natalia Macker back on stage, and we'll listen to a conversation between them two. So please help me welcome Natalia.
Hi, Ruth.
I like just talking, but okay, I'm ready for questions.
Hi, everybody. I think I know many of you. I'm Natalia Macker, and I am here tonight probably for many reasons, but I think the one that touches me tonight is many of you may know my middle son was born with a limb difference. And so I had the chance to connect with Ruth a couple of weeks ago and talk about what we were going to talk about tonight and her experience and what I wanted to know about that as a parent and all of the things that has been teaching me. So I'm going to ask Ruth a few questions, but please be thinking about your questions. So one of the stories that Ruth shared with me was about her parents and how when she was born, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, when Ruth was born, her parents didn't know she was going to have a limb difference until she was born, which was the same experience that I had as a parent. And so their journey started, in discovery of that started with her birth. And they made a decision, which is very similar to a decision that my family has made, which is we've raised our son as if he can do anything. And we talk about it, but don't spend a lot of time reveling in it. And so I'm curious for you to share if there was advice you could give your parents from where you are today, what you would tell them.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think I was, not to date myself, but I was born in the days before sonograms. So I was a surprise in terms of having a limb difference. I think I was not only a surprise to my parents, I was also a surprise to the medical community who didn't know a lot about limb differences and didn't even have a term for it. They had very archaic medical terms on how they referred to it. And so they were lucky because there was a nurse who noticed them a little bit bewildered and disappointed who came over and said, you're going to take this little girl home and you're going to treat her as you would any other child. You're going to love her and treat her as normal. And that's exactly what they did. They encouraged me to try everything. The challenge was when it came to actually talking about it. And I think when I talk to parents, especially with kids with disabilities, I talk about and even other kids, I talk about allowing for space for those conversations and keeping the communication open. Because one thing, having worked with teenagers for my entire career in the nonprofit space, is teenagers will tell their parents and other adults everything is fine. And when you dig a little, they'll think you're annoying. And then if you keep digging a little, you'll get to some gold. And so what I advise parents is keep digging a little and just create the space that feels safe so that kids can talk to you, because having a disability, there are challenges that come with it. There are stares that come with it. There are some things that people say that aren't always so nice. So who do you have other than a safe place to actually share some of that and know that you're not alone in this journey? Because I think by creating the space, we find space so that people don't feel so alone. So I advise parents to talk about it.
Thank you. When we all think about how we support each other, whether that's a friend who is going through unhiding in whatever their journey is, for you, what does support actually look like?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think that the first step is not making assumptions, right? So I think oftentimes, and I'll use the lens of disability, and even though I'm one person with my journey, there's a little bit of universal to this, is not making assumptions about someone's ability. Not thinking, because as I was saying to a father, Craig, I was saying to you, like this idea, or Kevin, is it Kevin? Craig? Mike, okay, so close, right? So close. There's a K in there, I got it. Is that I think youth with disabilities and people with disabilities figure things out. We accommodate and adapt in ways that you can't even imagine. So it's the idea of, and with unhiding, it's true too, is not to make assumptions about someone's behavior or someone's ability, but to actually ask out of support. And I put 2 caveats on that, is ask out of, because you're supporting someone, if you can support them, out of kindness. Be curious with kindness, and be willing to share something about yourself, because that's what true allyship and I think mentorship is about, is how are we sharing parts of ourselves with other people too, not just expecting someone to give us answers, but how do we actually share ourselves? How do we connect with them?
Thank you. Okay, I have one more, so get ready for your questions. Totally shifting gears, in listening to you tonight and in thinking about this group of women and the incredible accomplishments that all of these women hold, but also knowing the society we live in, and even thinking a little bit about myself, one of the things that I think women hide a lot are their accomplishments. For example, I went to Yale, and I have spent maybe 10 years telling people I went to college in Connecticut. Because it was easier. Generally, groups of men who are older than me, who would maybe make assumptions and have had direct comments made back to me. And so I'm curious how you think about or approach what it means to hide our accomplishments or hide things that we may actually be really, really proud of and excited to share, but feel like the world is telling us we have to hide them to make other people more comfortable.
It's a really good question, because I think there's a few pieces. There's the hiding of it, right? So let's take Yale as the example. And there's the hiding of it because of the fear of what others will think, right? There's the judgment that somebody will make, or assumption or bias of what they think about what that education means, even not knowing you, right? Like there's that piece. The second is, how is it holding you back, right? Like I always think about the thing that we're hiding. How is it holding you back from connecting? Is it important for someone to know that you went to Yale? Is it important for them to know about your education because it will bring you together? Is it also important for you to acknowledge that part of yourself, right? Because that's what this is really about. That's what unhiding starts with, is self-acceptance. And the reason the 4 steps are so important is not just because of the unhiding, though it's a huge part, is that they can be used in any situation. So as you're talking about the Yale part, acknowledging what it is. Why is it that you're not sharing that? So as a woman, why don't I share that part of my education? What are the assumptions that are going to be made? And then how can I start to share it out? Because unhiding is not an overnight process. It's not like tomorrow you're going to wake up and tell everyone, even though you just did here.
It's on my website.
Right, even though you just did here. But it's the idea of starting with one person. It's steps to unhiding. It's not an overnight process, because what happens when we try to do it overnight is we get upset with ourselves that, wow, I messed up. I should have done this. I should have done it. We beat ourselves up with that information. Then it's building out your community with others. And then it's sharing your story. And what a powerful representation, Natalia, not Mike, because you're willing to share that. And so that allows someone else to say, I have felt like that too about my education. Or, wow, I didn't tell you about my family, and maybe it's wealth, maybe it's poverty. Like, it allows for connection when we open up about those things. It lets people get to know us. That's the beauty of unhiding.
Thank you. Okay, Kristen has the magical catch box. So raise your hands, please.
And these are questions for both of us.
Sure, we're here for your wisdom. There's one, you got it? Great, and then get ready. When you finish, you're gonna toss it to the next.
Okay, hi, thank you. Do you find that there are certain industries where it's easier to be more open and others where it's not, and specifically I mean in the workplace?
That is a great question. And tell me your name.
Monica Erickson.
Say it again.
Monica Erickson.
Monica, thank you.
Yeah.
Monica, it's a really good question in terms of, are there specific industries and workplaces where unhiding is maybe easier and others that may be harder? What's been interesting so far in my work and speaking is I find companies that already have a bent to creative, to being those workspaces that allow for unhiding. So I think about industries that push people to think outside the box, to push people to be innovative and creative as those workspaces who are more open to it. I will say, with a caveat, I think it's absolutely about leadership and the leaders who are willing to allow for vulnerability, who have gotten rid of that old school mentality of keeping people at arm's length and not being vulnerable and not having all the answers. It's that newer leader who is willing to share where they don't know something, who's willing to create those safe spaces, those psychologically safe spaces in a workplace. And so I don't know, I look at engagement scores a lot of companies where employees feel engaged, but I'm gonna come back to you, Monica, after I've done some research also in terms of who are the companies, because I'm not sure. And it's interesting because my second book is actually about global leaders and unhiding that I'm working on right now, and what makes a culture, and you've just added a dimension to it, so thank you. Like, are there workplaces?
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Can we have a hand right here? You stand up and give it a toss.
Oh boy, this could be dangerous.
It's really it's really soft. Nothing can happen.
Hi, my name is Thibaut Sanchez, and I woke at Voticalis with my coworkers Caroline, who is right next to me.
Hi, everybody.
Something I've been doing in my free time is researching how much language we use every day that's very helpful to people with disabilities. Something I've been doing at Voticalis, I made some artwork depicting what ableist words we use every day without realizing it. I can give you some examples. Forgive me for saying some of them, like dumb, idiot, stupid, lame. Something I've been trying to do is get people to not say those words because they really have ableist history. Because when you look at a deep word, it has a really different meaning. Yeah. So I didn't know, I thought dumb meant unintelligent, but my word deep word, it meant actually someone that does not speak.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. Can you repeat the last part of the question?
Kind of like something I was like the ableist language I've been doing, trying to get us to eliminate from a vocab. Instead of using all these ableist words, I think of better ones like you can say ridiculous, unintelligent, wild. You can also say like uneducated.
Yeah, we have a lot of learning to do around disability. Thank you for that question. Because I think, the thinking about culture and how has disability language evolved and what do we still have to do with it? And I think ableism, it's funny, I mentioned to someone recently about even the term ableism, and they thought I made it up. And I'm like, no, it's a real thing, just like racism and sexism. It's how do we think about language? And part of the journey, and it's interesting, when I was running a nonprofit in Harlem, New York, it was the time, toward the end of my career there, it was George Floyd's death, and also Black Lives Matter was rising, and my staff wanted to know, well, Ruth, what are we doing? What's the action plan? And I had to admit to them, I haven't done the work that I needed to do on racial equity and racial justice, and it wasn't up to my staff to teach me, it wasn't up to the families I was working with or the kids. I had to go and do the work. And I make the same argument about disability history, that people have to go out and do the work because there is an intense history around disability. There is a reason that we have the tropes that we have. There's a reason that in every James Bond movie, the evil character has a disability. And I take it super seriously in terms of the language that we use. Even when I was writing my book, I one of the stories in there is I had gone to get my annual checkup with a new doctor, and I told him obviously about my hand as part of my medical history, and he was on his computer, and this makes me stressed when a doctor doesn't look at you during the exam and just looks at their computer screen. I don't know if it's happened to any of you, but it happened to me. And as he was typing in, he's like, well, what do you call your hand? And I said, well, I guess the term is limb different. It's also called amniotic band syndrome. He's like, yeah, that's not here. He's like, it's just a birth defect. And I'm like, well, he's like, maybe it's an amputee. You're an amputee? And I'm like, no, I have a limb difference. And when I wrote the book, the reason I share that is Grammarly picked that up, saying, I think that's an old school term that we use. I'm like, well, how come the doctor didn't pick it up, but Grammarly was able to pick it up? So around ableist language, I think there's a lot of work we continue to do, and we need to continue to do, and understanding our history around disability is so critical to understanding ableism.
Something I want to add to that, Ruth, when my son was born, when I went looking for the words of what this is, because we had a similar experience of in the room immediately after, like, we don't know what this is or what caused it or whatever it was. And I had, I think largely because of society, struggled with using the word disability. And so I attached onto limb difference. But then when you and I spoke, one of the great gifts that you gave me in that first conversation was how using words and acknowledging those words actually helps you find like the freedom of community and to connect with other people who maybe other parents of children with limb differences. But if you refuse to use the words in a loving, positive way, you might miss out on the opportunity for that connection and community building.
And part of identity. I mean, I have people say to me, oh, well, I don't really like the word disability because it has the word dis in it. And I say two things always back. I say, when you negate my choice of how I identify, you take away from my identity. You don't allow me to own part of my identity, part of this community that I finally feel a part of. And the second thing I say is, do you feel the same way about the words distinguish, discussion, disco? Is that what you feel? Because if that's true, then I got you. But if it's not, then how do we re-own? And I think that's what the disability community is doing now, is re-owning the language around disability and not watering it down with terms that sometimes can feel a little bit ableist, like differently abled and other terms, so that people with disabilities, we can re-own, much like the LGBTQ community re-owned the Q in LGBTQ.
Yeah, there's something about it that I think for me, it's like it made it more comfortable for me, but wasn't about what my son may or may not need once he had vocabulary and finding that connection. Let's take one or two more. Is there another one over here?
Kristen, aren't you going to throw it?
Yeah, it's just a catch box.
Hi, thanks Ruth for sharing your story with us. I appreciate how you're giving us the tools as individuals to unhide whatever we are hiding. My question is more around like societies and systems. So how some populations are kind of forced to hide more than others, or how we create spaces for some people to more easily set up for success when they unhide versus others. And I'm curious what we as organization leaders or as government leaders can do to dismantle the structures that are causing the hiding in the first place.
Yeah. No, and what's your name?
Mickey.
Say it again.
Mickey, like the mouse.
Okay, now I'm really stuck. No, thank you for your question. I think that, and I'm happy if you want to jump in too, I think there are three things I talk about a lot, which is the idea that leaders go first, right? In any workplace or any culture, how do leaders show up and go first? It was a part of my work that I denied for a long time. When people would come in and ask the question, well, what's the culture like here? I would deflect, and I would say, well, everyone contributes to culture. I don't work with robots. Everyone contributes to culture. What I missed was, as a leader, I helped define and contribute to culture at the top, and I was responsible, and I didn't always get that. And so leaders go first by A, owning culture, and by B, sharing part of themselves with the culture so that they make a safe place so that people can unhide. The second part that I think is really important is starting to have the conversations in workplaces. It's why employee resource groups and affinity groups, in my opinion, are super important in a workspace, because they have a big vision and a big role in terms of shared experience, allowing for people to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel connected, to also adopt the business goals and to look at how we recruit. It's part of a talent life cycle strategy. How do we recruit people when they come on? Where do we post jobs? How do we write job descriptions as that beginning? How do we retain people when they're in the workplace in terms of accommodations and adjustments and things that people actually need? How do we support them? And then when people leave us, what do we do with all of that information that people give on an exit interview and their release? Like, how do we incorporate that into the space? And the third thing I talk about is, what are we measuring? Because what we don't measure, we don't count, right? And probably the opposite is true too. What we don't count, we don't measure. But so I talk to workplaces about, how are you thinking about the employees that you have? How have you made it safe to unhide? What are you asking? What questions are you asking? And the beauty of it is that I've created a framework that I call the Cure to Inclusion. And it's an acronym for connection, understanding, representation, and empathy, with belonging in the center. But it starts out with what you're all doing here tonight, which is the understanding part. What are you understanding about your differences? What are you understanding about the way you think about difference? And I imagine that's the life brief also goes into just thinking about how you understand yourself. And then it comes, because that only then can you actually listen with an open ear and connect with people. And then thinking about the connections, thinking about the reason the R is there is, how do we in workplaces and cultures create a space that's safe where people feel heard and seen? Who's represented on our teams and who's not? Whose voices are heard and whose are not? That becomes important. And then how do we show up with empathy? And it's a game changer when we can show up with empathy and actually hear people and listen to them. And at the center, that's how we create cultures of belonging. And so I work with companies and leaders specifically because I do think it starts with leadership and executive teams, because employees kind of already have the answers of what they want the workplace to look like. It's leaders that then have to get on board with that. That would be my answer. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
One more? Do we have another one? No more? Okay, Ruth, you have to bring us home.
Okay, I can do that. And what's interesting, thank you, Natalia. Thank you for being with me.
you.
Yeah. I'm just going to grab this. What's interesting that you don't know is that I had the chance to meet Natalia's son right before this, and I got to fist bump with him. He has a limb difference just like mine, and it was his first time ever fist bumping with anyone. He's 5. If I had had that at 5, it might have changed the way I thought about my limb difference, and I hope it does for Woody. Because when we hide, we foster an idea that there's only one way to be in life, and that we keep people disconnected from us. When we unhide, we allow for people to get to know us. We allow for people to see themselves in our stories. And isn't that the culture that we're all looking to create? Is a place where people feel seen and heard and belong. And I know I say that a lot, it's almost like my refrain, but it's a beautiful thing to orchestrate. And thank you for that last question, because I think it ties in directly. We allow for that, we can orchestrate that in our companies because we can build retention Imagine when retention soars. Imagine when employees feel safe. Imagine when they feel like they belong. Imagine when we as people feel confident and connected, and we get back so much time when we unhide. We get to thrive. And nobody does it. The reason I worked with kids for over 25 years is because nobody gets it better sometimes than kids. And often a question I get from the audience is, well, how do you talk to kids about difference and disability? And what's interesting is I have had the occasion more than once of a kid coming up with their beautiful, unfiltered curiosity that we all know and love, and sometimes dread. And a kid will come up and say, oh, what happened to your hand? And I'll say, oh, this is the way I was born. This is part of me. We all have something that's different. And immediately, a parent or a guardian or someone watching that kid will come over and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry they said anything. I'm so sorry they asked. We don't say things like that. And we message two things to kids when we do that. We message that don't be curious. Curiosity isn't always a good thing, which it is because kids are great at it, but it's a teaching moment for kids. And the other thing that we message is that disability is something we don't talk about. And we've all grown up as now those adult kids who learned that message. But we can learn something from kids, like I did. I was working in a nonprofit, and I was passing through a lobby, and I saw a 7-year-old who was completely bored sitting there. And I asked her what she liked to do, and she said, I like to draw. And I said, okay, so I went and got her paper and pens, and she said, what should I draw? And I said, I don't know, anything, whatever you feel like. And she then, at that point, noticed my hand. And she said, what happened? And I said, oh, that's the way I was born. I gave her my same spiel. Everyone has something different. And she said, oh, I think it's cute. And I said, oh, she's just a kid. She doesn't know. And I left. I came downstairs later that afternoon, and as I was leaving, she handed me a poem. And it's in my book, and I just wanted to read it to you. Dear Ruth, your hand is the prettiest I've ever seen. Don't worry. Look at your hand and say, my hand is beautiful. Say, I love my hand. Please don't worry about your hand. Worry only about you. She was wise beyond her years. What I didn't tell you is that when I was leaving and got that poem from her, I noticed her mom was with her. And her mom had huge skin keloids, skin scars, and scars all over her neck. And I knew that that child had witnessed other people staring and had become really comfortable with it and gotten to a place that she could help someone else. Our differences are what make us unique. Our differences are also what connect us. And my hope over the next day is that you find the people to connect with. You find those who you can share your differences with so that you can feel that connection and you can feel that acceptance, because you have a huge opportunity. And as I said, it's not an easy process, but you've taken the first step. And I know it's not easy because I did it myself. And so if it gets hard, I'm here. You can reach out to me anytime. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn talking about it. I post a lot of selfies on Instagram talking about it. But unhiding is a gift. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to give you that gift. Thank you.